I think the problem with complacency is we lose sight of the bar. I have my my middle class lifestyle. I have the things that I've wanted, but truly, when you were a 6-year-old kid, you probably had much bigger ambitions and goals than you do when you're 25. For a lot of us, or even less ambitions at 45. You have children, you have other things in life, you have your career, and then you go, oh, this is kind of where I landed. I don't know. I believe in really pushing towards who you really are meant to become. And I don't think any of us are truly designed to just live in complacency. I think that's an embarrassing existence of life. I'm sorry. I just think there's way too many problems in this world that you can convert into profits. And there's way too many people struggling that you could convert into abundance for you to sit at home and go, I'm complacent in what I'm doing.
Problems are what? Problems are profits!
All right, welcome to the Problems or Profits podcast. For me, problems or profits means running into some sort of adversity or challenge that you're able to keep moving forward and pushing through until you get to a profit and solve that problem. So today we have Ben Humble, CEO, on our podcast today. Very excited to have you, Ben. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, guys, for having me.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to have you on the podcast, Ben. And so the first warm-up question we ask all our guests is, what's the most expensive thing you've ever broken?
Most expensive thing for me, because I look at money and time differently, it's obviously my own mindset. I've broken it by doing stupid things. I've wasted a lot of time, which cost me a lot of money. So anytime I broke my mindset in the past, that was the most expensive. Probably the one occurrence where I think about the most is, when I found myself rehabbing a house at 2:00 in the morning after my renovation team had quit on me, and I was slugging it away for about a week straight before I finally realized I'm never going to make it. This is never going to be the answer. People keep showing up, people keep quitting, I keep training, I keep hiring, and I struggled. So all that time that I wasted, I had to just break it down and go through a period of almost depression in a way to come back on the other side of it. So that's the most expensive thing I keep breaking often, actually, is me.
I appreciate that. And for our next warm-up question, if you had $1 million and only 24 hours to spend it or do something with it, what would you do?
I'm probably going too deep on these questions. I realize these are warm-up questions here. 24 hours and $1 million to spend it here. If I only had 20, am I dying at the end of the 24 hours?
No, you're not dying. Just the money disappears.
Just the money disappears. Okay, cool. 24 hours is a lot of time. I'm probably going to indulge in something for 24 hours and use the whole thing because I'm all or nothing. If I only got the 24 hours, I'm going to put it to work, do something crazy with it, and at least have an amazing memory to look back on.
Awesome. And then our third question here, Ben, is what makes you you?
I think what makes me is that thing that I refer to as like that potential. Knowing that you have potential and then willing to break yourself daily to go after it, to humble the shit out of yourself on a regular basis, that's what makes me. I don't mind having tough conversations. I don't mind being wrong. I think all those things are part of an ever-evolving progressive growth. And if you're willing to go there and look like a fool sometimes, I think you'll come out the back end. So I think that's what makes me. I'm really not that concerned with being embarrassed or with losing, because I think there's bigger opportunity on the other side of that coin.
Awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And then so just kind of like moving into the first main question I had for you, Ben, if you don't mind, just kind of give us a recap of your backstory. And I think that, there's lots of ways that we could interpret your backstory, but to me, it's almost one giant thesis on problems or profits. So if you don't mind, maybe just.
Well, I think problems and profits is my whole life. It's my parents' life. It's looking at the world through a lens of potential adversity and going, I'm a victim or I'm going to conquer it. So, starting from a communist country to my dad literally running away, grabbing me by the hand. We crossed 3 different countries before landing to Canada. And here as a young kid, 6, 7 years old, my parents had 9 children in total. Everything was problems or profits. If you wanted something as a kid, you had to go and get it. You had to go figure it out. I had a paper route since I was 11 years old because that was the only way that I could make that $5 per week from Penny Saver. So it was never really accepted in my household, or really in my mind, that you're just going to sit back and wait for things to happen. If you wanted it, you're just going to run through it. So I think adversity is an amazing gift if you see it as one, because adversity is the one element that will allow you to gain greater perspective, I think, than people who don't have adversity. Or I should say they don't have enough adversity where it really propels them to do something.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly pushing that envelope. And for me, adversity is such a phenomenal thing when you intelligently review it and you look at it and you look at the opportunity beyond adversity. I think it's fantastic. And that's my own personal journey. And I've been able to draw from other people's stories that I admire, who started with nothing or with massive adversity, and they were able to create amazing abundance in their life and people around them. So I think that's the thing, man. It's just being able to move beyond the obvious. Like, problems are easy, meaning everybody sees the problem. It truly takes a determined person to continuously see the opportunity beyond the problem. And we can call it profits, we can call it mindset abundance. They all lead to a benefit. So, like, where's the net benefit in everything that happens in your life? And it's so hard to think that way. And I believe it's a training. If you train yourself and you condition yourself to see that net benefit, then you can always, like, it almost doesn't matter what happens in life. You just persevere through it, regardless of how long it takes. That's my thought.
Yeah. And so building upon that idea of adversity, like, as you succeed, as you climb the success ladder, does it become harder to find adversity to tap into? Do you, like, go back to the original well of original adversity and tap into that? Like, how do you create the challenge or compulsion to keep going forward always?
Well, I think the enemy of adversity is complacency. Like, when you finally reach a place and you develop an ego around it, saying, I deserve, then you start to lose perspective over the adversity. Like, what I like to do is just propel myself into new levels. I really do want to be kind of at the bottom end of that pool. I want to be the small minnow in the shark tank on a consistent basis. Not because it's necessarily fun in the moment, but if I forward look at my life 30, 40, 50 years from now, it's either going to be a series of always being the small minnow in the shark tank, and then developing the courage, the desire, and the push to become the bigger fish, or it's complacency along the way and somewhere you stopped. And I think when you have such a massive purpose and you have a bigger determining reason why you're going to keep moving forward, there's really no reason to stop. Like, what are you going to stop at? The 2 cars and the nice home? Matt, I think part of it for me, man, is like, when you're used to being in a level of consistent push and growth, my biggest struggle, guys, is getting bored. Like, really, like, if I sit back and get complacent, I'll just get bored and then I'll get into other trouble. So for me, it's actually an extremely double positive. I get to push forward and realize things most people never will do or see or understand. And at the same time, I get to have a massive net benefit, which is serving myself, serving people around me, and, like, really being able to do amazing things for the world that most people will only dream about or talk about. So I don't see the complication in overcoming adversity. I see it as a process that you either maturely think on and you move forward, or you become a victim of adversity and you start calling it oppression and you start labeling yourself as a person who has no options in life. And I truly believe that regardless of where you're at, you have choices. And that, I think, is the foundation for what pushes me every day. I literally have a choice to sit right here or to walk over there, to sit in fear or to walk in faith. So I think movement is the most profound thing that a human can undertake, because movement is directional. Sitting in complacency is not directional. There's no opportunity for growth because you're lacking the movement that it takes to produce growth. So I think when you get stuck, the best thing to do is move. Literally move. If you have to move your physical body, if you have to move your relationships, if you have to move your network, if you have to move your thinking, I think it takes a movement. And in movement, there's discovery, and in discovery, to me, that's where abundance lives. So I love the idea of discovery and movement, honestly, guys. And I'm okay moving and getting shut down. I'm okay moving and people slapping me saying, hey, you can't move here just yet. Cool. Thank you for setting the bar. I think the problem with complacency is we lose sight of the bar. I have my middle-class lifestyle. I have the things that I've wanted. But truly, when you were a 6-year-old kid, you probably had much bigger ambitions and goals than you do when you're 25. For a lot of us, or even less ambitions at 45. You have children, you have other things in life, you have your career, and then you go, oh, this is kind of where I landed. I don't know. I believe in really pushing towards who you really are meant to become. And I don't think any of us are truly designed to just live in complacency. I think that's an embarrassing existence of life. I'm sorry. I just think there's way too many problems in this world that you could convert into profits. And there's way too many people struggling that you could convert into abundance for you to sit at home and go, I'm complacent in what I'm doing. Maybe an aggressive viewpoint, Matt, and Rebecca, but that's really the one I live in every day. I literally refuse to accept excuses from myself and from other people.
Absolutely. Now, when you're younger, a lot of people tend to think that success is just this linear pathway. And you mentioned that complacency. So are there any points in your pathway that you've felt yourself getting towards that complacency setting, and how did you overcome that?
I think the idea of success being linear is an extremely arrogant viewpoint on life. That's like this godlike mindset that you're going to be able to predict the future, know exactly what's going to happen. Nobody predicted a shutdown. Nobody predicted other things happening in the world today, just like nobody predicted them last time and the time before that. And there's always going to be another element there that people go, oh my God, if it was only for this thing. I think excuses are so readily available that the person who's selective in deciding to not choose the excuse is the person who's already winning. So like a case in my life on this progressive growth is it's levels of awareness. Like at one point in my life, I knew I didn't want to work a 9-to-5 job because I saw the cap, the upside, or sorry, I should say that the top end of what I could produce. Maybe it was $100,000 a year, maybe it was $200,000 a year, but it was always this idea that how can you really create something beyond the box that you're given to fill? And then when I got into small business, I'm like, wow, there's a level of awareness beyond this. I can truly leverage. Wow, I can truly leverage. So I started leveraging my own skills, my own time, my own energy. And then I started really getting a mentor, and I understood that it's actually beyond your control. One of the biggest growth, I think, opportunities happened for me when I finally relinquished control over my business, and I actually was able to gain freedom. Like instead of micromanaging every nuance of every little thing, I readily understood that there was an 80-20 rule in life, that the majority of the things I was micromanaging truly did not ever move the needle in what I wanted 50 years from now. They moved the needle today. They were relevant today. So I was literally creating my own scarcity by not playing big enough. And I think the only way to play big enough is to relinquish control of the things that hold you back. And so I got a mentor. I started seeing the bigger picture. I started hanging out with people who did things differently. And I think that was extremely valuable to me. You know, I thought that a business owner was a slave and he ran around all day and he was rewarded for that level of activity 50 years down the road when he could have a nice car and a nice home and have a good family. And then I saw people my age, like traveling the world and, you know, buying nice things and like investing in charities. And I'm like, oh, my natural tendency was to go, this person was given something on a platter and that's why they have the ability to do that. And I failed to realize that they weren't given anything. They simply chose a different option. And then I realized that there was abundance beyond the direct activity that I could put in. It was no longer about my input. It's no longer about my direct output. It was really about creating a whole new world. So I know it sounds like a Little Mermaid here, but you literally can create into existence what you want, in my mind, if you simply pick a point in the future and work backwards. And I think my biggest challenge in life was not picking a big enough point in the future. You know, it was like, I only want this. And then I hit it early. And then it was rather disappointing.
Right. Now, Ben, your whole thing, and one thing that I really appreciate about what you do is you're always adding value for other people, and you're creating rather than consuming on a regular basis so that others can excel. And you've taken that mentorship and lessons that you've learned and you're putting it out into the world. So that name that you get called, Ben Humble, like where's that from? Where does humble come from? And can you tell any stories as to moments where you have been humbled by life or by others?
So I got to give props to Matt because the name Humble really was developed in a Like we were hanging out at my office a number of years ago, and we were sitting there, and I'm like, man, I should get a name for what I represent, because Muresan, nobody can pronounce my last name. I'm like, let me just give up on this name here real quick. You know, I think when you're famous, weird names matter. Or when you've done something significant, people remember your weird name. When you have an ethnic or weird name and really you don't have enough awareness, people just butcher it all day, right? And then they're gonna. So I thought, what represents me? And I think this idea of being willing to almost die daily, like humbling myself, living in a form of humility. For me, it's a spiritual development, right? Like being able to go, I just don't know what I don't know. That resonated to me. I had a mentor say that one time, and I was like, damn, that's it right there. I just don't know what I don't know. And the path to progress is through humility. Because otherwise, I see so many people develop what I call middle manager effect. They make a little bit more than the person next to them. They have a little bit nicer car, nicer things than the person next to them. They have a marginally better life, but to them, they think it's a 2 or 3x multiple of the person directly next to them. And the truth is that it isn't. You're actually just far too arrogant to recognize that, like, you're still just a pea in a pod. It's still the same pod. Like, you really know better or different. So I said, why not just drop this whole idea of being better and just adopt this idea of constantly growing, you know? So, like, I've had many, I guess, humbling moments. One of it was when, you know, I learned about the idea of wholesaling real estate, you know, from one of my mentors, Chris, because I had a struggling business. Back then I was flipping houses. I'd done about 75 homes, had a small little rental team, and I honestly was running out of deals to buy. This is like 2017, 18. It was really heating up. So I learned about the idea of wholesaling, and I learned about the idea of, like, just be who you are. And I started to recognize the significance of, it doesn't really matter if people like you today. What matters is that if you accomplish the things you want to long term. So I went through a really difficult identity struggle where I came out wearing like gold jumpsuits and singing rap songs. And I went really far from the conservative right to the liberal left, if you will. And it was like almost like a bipolar transition. And people go, this guy has lost his mind. And I had to kind of course correct, I think, to regain you know, the identity that I was shooting for. But I was humbled in those moments with criticism and people like, you know, like slandering you. Like, you know, when you built a business for 10 years and then all of a sudden people go, this guy's a complete joke. It's tough to deal with. It's painful, right? Because only you know the sacrifice you put in. Only I know the level of work we've done in the years of, you know, wasted weekends and things like that on the business. So, but I think on the back end, I'm completely, I guess, thankful for having gone through a transition and being able to discover myself in this capacity. Because today I really just don't care. It doesn't matter what people think. Like, none of that is relevant to me because other people can't give or take away my abundance. They really can't or give or take away my purpose in life. It's all up to me. I got to move forward between me and my faith and just keep doing it every day. So I have been humbled many times.
Yeah, appreciate you laying that all out for us, Ben. And just kind of circling back to that idea of sometimes not thinking big enough or not having the perspective, do you make purposeful time for that? Or like where and when does your reflection time occur?
I really don't have a static answer. I could say to you guys that I have an obsessive personality type in my mind. I'm very much a strategist, and I think, Matt, maybe you might be similar to me in that regard. It never turns off. In fact, if you catch me in an interview or in the middle of work, that's really the only time it's not active. You know, like every time above that, it's like abundance, more opportunity. I keep myself highly engaged. If I don't, that boredom sets in. And I think once you have a taste of, not success, that's not the word I'm looking for. Once you have a taste of abundance and really potential, and you go, wow, tomorrow I can buy this skyscraper. When you have that level of thinking and you go, how do I make it happen? Who do I talk to? Where do I raise the capital? Do I even want it? It's like it never shuts off. It becomes like this exciting thing where every day is a new level of discovery. And I think that's why I'm really enjoying my travels lately, because I'm just discovering the world. I'm getting to see things and talk to people and have dialogue with people and have really mature conversations about other people's struggle. And what I find is there's actually unity in that discovery. there's actually millions of other people discovering as well. So it's like, who can I meet today that's also discovering? So I don't know, like, I don't have a specific time of day. I have an ongoing like mental push because I really do enjoy this. It just becomes part of my core identity now. Well, how do you guys, let me throw it back to you guys. Like, I know this is an interview style, but how do you guys see that stuff? Like in terms of potential and abundance, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, I know for myself, I definitely find value in trying to regularly make time to reflect, because otherwise I can really just get caught up in the minutia of what we talk about working in the business versus working on the business. So there definitely, for myself, needs to be a balance there. And I think I usually have a tendency to spend too little time trying to gain that perspective and really think big and plan big. I think that's just a challenge a lot of people have. But at the same time, it also is always kind of there, like you said, running in the background. But I find that it's useful to have it running in the background, but there is also real value, at least for myself, to set aside like 100% dedicated time where I can really unleash it. Because otherwise, sometimes what happens is I find like I play with the same idea for too long almost, because like I'm not giving myself enough time to dive deep into it. So what that means is like I pick it up, but I'm only ever really scratching it superficially because I'm not giving enough time to like get beneath the surface.
I really do like that. Let's talk about that complexity. I have a little strategy that I use. Maybe this may be beneficial for your audience, but I've learned this from someone, I don't know who, the play, preparation, and perform model. So what I do is like, I'll go out and just play, whether it's drive my car, you know, just get out there, like, and just allow my mind to think. And that's when a lot of these thoughts start permeating. And then I'll try to find time, no specific time of day. Typically when I work out, I find that's one of my most productive times because I got an hour and a half a day of just working out and my laptop's working right there. And I can usually just extract my thoughts with no distractions. And I find that's a really useful exercise for me. And once they're on paper, then they become real. Then you have to actually ask tougher questions. I think the challenge with thinking is like, you're never truly creating accountability by never putting pen to paper. And it's like, it's interesting when pen hits that paper, it becomes, now I have to figure it out versus a cool idea that I had. So
yeah. And
I don't know, what's your take on that?
As well, once you put it on paper, like you have to take it a little bit more seriously because there's the risk now that others are going to see it or challenge it. So I think for me, it really forces me to be more thorough in the vetting of the idea or the concept. And that's when it really comes to life rather than just being that concept.
Yeah, Ben, I think you hit on a good point there that I think is actually really important with the working out or even just surrounding yourself by others who are doing cool shit, because it just gets your mind churning. And I find that when you give yourself that time and space to just focus on high productivity, like working out or going for a walk or, you know, reading your book, giving yourself that time and space. Like some of my best ideas are like when I'm in the shower or when I'm out on a walk or just my friend is talking about something that they're working on and then it just sparks something. So I find by actually doing those things that add value to your life, it tends to come back on you. So I really think that there is something to be said about the energy that you put out there will come back in a lot of ways.
I love this. Let me touch on that. I think intentionality is the key word. Like when you have moments of creativity and thinking, like we all have these aha light bulbs, but I think we fail to be intentional enough to capture them. Because when you capture them, then you can actually start evaluating the ifs and hows and who's behind those ideas. So I really do try to do that. I carry a little notepad with me. So it's always in the background, but when something triggers and I go, oh, wow, that would be a thing. That's something I should be doing. That's something I should be thinking about. That's something I should, you know, participate in. Then you can really jot those things down and start moving forward. But you got to be so intentional. You know, one of my mentors talked about intentionality, and I really discovered through watching him that your level of intentionality really determines where you end up in life. Like I think a lot of folks, a lot of people out there are just not that intentional about where they're trying to accomplish. So they just land in this average kind of warm water situation. And I think that the progress is in the deep end, in the hot water. Like get in there, be intentional, have tough dialogue, like start making big plans, And I think that's where the discovery happens because nobody's willing to go there. I think it's a small percentage of people that say, how do I build a world-class company? How do I create massive abundance for me and an entire community of people, right? How do I disrupt an entire industry as it relates to real estate? Like those big questions, guys, they can either be barroom talk or they can be really intentional dialogues with, and when you find other people, I think that there's that mastermind effect that happens because, the thoughts start like filling in the gaps and then it goes, wow, this actually is possible. The only question is, do we want it? That's always my biggest thing in life right now is, do I want it? Yes or no? If it's a yes, I'm far too intentional. My thinking is far too intentional for it to almost not happen. My reticular activating system in the brain is so triggered all the time moving forward. So that's a whole other thing. It leads me down to keeping your mind sharp, keeping your body sharp. Like there's a whole other side of this thing. But yeah, I think that's amazing. Just putting it on paper, man.
Mm-hmm. And so, Ben, when you're balancing those different opportunities and asking yourself if you really want it, is there a specific sequence of events or questions that you're asking yourself or a process? Is it just like a gut, like a spark, you know it when you know it?
Again, I'm probably more strategic than most people, and I don't mean that's a good thing. It gets in the way, right? I know other people who are probably more willing to jump on things because they have a good idea. I'm always looking out like 10 to 20 years and going, if I accomplish this thing, what will I say to myself? What conversation will I have with myself then? What's the dialogue look like? Man, I'm really glad we spent 5 years of our life on that. That was a very productive use of our lifetime. We're really glad with the impact it created. Because, money's, for me, guys, money is just a thing. It's a tool. It's currency. Money is not the goal. Money is extremely boring when you've created a life of discipline around money. Like, I'm just not one to go out and spend a whole ton. I'm not one to throw it away. I value its ability to produce a result, but I don't value money itself. Accumulating money to me is not a goal. I don't know. It's not something I desire. I think if there's a result behind it that benefits many people, that becomes exciting. So that's my process, Matt. I'll go out in time and go, when I'm sitting in my rocking chair, am I going to look back and say that was a fruitful use of my time on earth? And if the answer is no, and if it was just about money, I'm probably not doing it. So I'm pretty forward thinking that way and having tough conversations with myself.
Awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that additional context because I do think each person has to find the process for themselves, but again, very rarely do people actually have any sort of sorting mechanism or process behind it. It's far too often left to happenstance, right? And I think that that's really dangerous because there are so many opportunities out there that if you just happen to choose the one that falls in front of you versus the one that's right for you, it can be a while before you really learn that lesson. I think we see that with a lot of real estate investors that sometimes fall in love with a concept because they think it's going to get the result they want rather than really sitting down and making sure that it's going to get the result that they want.
Let me ask you guys a question. I'm always living in this reality where I don't have enough time, meaning I'm really quick to move things forward, really quick to try to multiply things whenever possible. That to me is my scarcity. I really don't have time for stuff unless it's really valuable that I see. How do you guys perceive time? Because to me, the opportunities are so big in life. Why would you waste a second on doing nothing? I don't know. Just something I want to throw back to you guys here.
Yeah, I love the dialogue, Ben. I think there's this great saying that life happens to you or it happens because of you. And it's all about taking that extreme ownership. And it comes back to that intention piece that you had touched on. And I think time is the one thing that you just can't make more of, you can't change. So the way that you spend it is important. So I really like that dialogue about time, because if you don't take ownership over your time, over your schedule, over what you're doing and how you're spending it, then it just will be used up. Suddenly you'll snap your fingers and you'll be looking back on a life that you just had happen. It's so important that you step in and take that ownership. Yeah.
I think when it comes to time, outside of a little bit of purposeful procrastination, I think that that's just kind of a system I've built where sometimes that can help create a certain sense of urgency taking time really seriously and time management is it has to be the crux of your life philosophy almost if you want to get the most out of life, in my opinion.
You know what this ties back in is the idea of compound growth, right? As it relates to real estate, to money, and to your own endeavors. Like my job is to put all the boats in the water today so I can allow time to be on my side and cultivate. I think if you don't plant enough seeds today, the natural time that's going to pass anyways is kind of a waste. So I want to plant seeds in relationship, plant seeds in my business growth and my finances. I want to plant seeds in my faith so that over time these things can begin to multiply and really see a harvest season happening, because I don't think it's linear. I think you work for a season. I think you work intelligently for another season. There's always a wasted season of work where it's just more, and then there's a season of better in my life. And then from there it's about, okay, now there's going to be a harvest that comes. So the time that you missed out on, you're actually not going to regain the momentum that you could have built on the time that you've given up. It's not about I can just do it tomorrow. Of course you can. You didn't just lose the time. You truly lost the opportunity cost, if you will, of all the momentum you could have built up until now. So for me, this is a really powerful concept. Like, are we planting enough seeds and having great conversations and getting to know people and getting to create a business? And then are you shooting big enough in life where those seeds are going to cultivate into something truly phenomenal for yourself and other people? So that's where I go with time as an indicator. It's like, I have to say no to just about everything to say yes to the right things. And that's been a useful tool that I've used, which I struggled with in the past, but it's been a really vital tool lately in the last couple of years of just the ability of going, no, I'm over here. And not in a disrespectful way to people and relationships, but in a way that's about purpose driving. Hey, I'm really purposeful about what I'm creating. And if you want to be a part of it, fantastic. But if you're trying to divert my attention to another thing, that's not my alignment. So I'm really focused on aligning and not just grinding or hustling anymore, if that makes sense for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So one question I wanted to ask Ben, just kind of moving in a slightly different direction. We're talking about how do you prioritize what opportunities you take on. One of the questions we love to ask our guests is, what's a problem right now that maybe you're not solving? So maybe it's either just a problem that you haven't been able to solve. Maybe it's a problem you've just chosen not to solve because you saw other opportunities, but a problem that's just sitting there right now begging to be turned into a profit.
Well, I think that there's a massive opportunity in the Canadian space to really create an abundance mindset around real estate, around business, around growth. And I think that there's a massive scarcity. So I recognize that there's a big opportunity in creating an abundance thing, whether that's through aligning certain groups of people, whether that's through creating some kind of programs or offerings, whether it's national events that really bring people together. I think there's truly an abundance opportunity because in my mind, a lot of Canadians live in what I call middle class scarcity, right? Like if they have a certain standard of living, to them that becomes the norm, which I think it's a false narrative. Like it's the norm in Canada, but not the norm in the rest of the world. There's really no disparity as it pertains to like the US, for example. However, in that case, though, losing a little bit to them seems like they're losing a lot. Like if you drop a little bit in value of like your perceived value, let's just say financially, you go from 2 cars to 1 car or from 1 car to 0 cars, you go, oh my Lord, I'm in big trouble. And I just don't think that's the reality. So I think there's an interesting opportunity to truly align everybody. And that's going to be a very, very big undertaking. But like creating national impact, or at least within a certain sector, like real estate or personal finance, or, I think that's a big challenge I would love to fight for. Go and be the one advocate, the one disruptor, going, you don't live in scarcity. In fact, there's so much abundance, you're just failing to grasp the abundance and moving forward on it. So I think there's a tactical way to do that. But that's what excites me, guys, is going to do big shit. Like, hey, go and move mountains, because who the hell cares about bunny hills? I don't know. That's my thinking.
That's awesome. And do you have any ways that you're moving towards that right now, Ben?
Well, obviously with, I think Cash Flow Tribe as a movement, that's how I see our real estate community really is moving towards abundance thinking. Like we have a community of thousands of people right now, and as you guys know, that I think are developing a mindset of abundance through practical, useful things like daily reading and relationship building and things of that nature. But I just think it's so much bigger. Like we can expand on that principle so much more, and in a way, like almost become more capitalistic about opportunities and about abundance. Abundance is there for everybody, and I think you have to make a conscious cognitive choice to go, I'm going to take some. It's like the sky, it doesn't go away. You know, abundance thinking is available. So my question always is, why aren't people reaching? Where is the thing? And then I also think, guys, there may be a catalyst where they're going to have to start reaching. You know, like what if a big economic downturn happens? What happens then? What happens to that disparity? Does it actually become a wider gap? And then are you going to see an influx, a very polarizing influx of people who are moving towards it because they have no choice now, because they're in a more like an actual scarcity? So I don't know. I think as long as it remains middle class, there's very much a comparison syndrome. But I think when the disparity happens, there'll be a bigger sector of people that go, no, I need to actually take bigger action and live in abundance. So it's going to be interesting how it develops. But I just see a really, really cool chance to align people. And like value is a tough word, but I think utility and relative value will probably change a little bit on some things. And that, to me, guys, I'm a disruptor, so I like volatility. I like change. I come from a communist country that rejected the idea of change and rejected the idea of abundance. So it was always scarcity and oppression. And they labeled it with different excuses like we're for the people and we're for this. And it's really been a really strong thought of mine to really push back against that notion that, you know, any one person knows what's best for all people. I think that's a dangerous play. So, but I think you can create opportunities, and I think you allow people to move in abundance if they're so choosing to do so. So that's what excites me, guys.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really well said, Ben. And really appreciate you making time to jump on this episode of the Problems or Profits podcast with us. Obviously, people can find you everywhere on social media, Ben Humble CEO. Any other last words you want to leave us with as we wrap up?
I love the idea of problems and profits. I think it's such a strong language around something that's so often overlooked. Like you literally have a choice to move forward in growth or to accept what you're given as a negative. And I would really encourage your entire audience. There's so much available to you if you simply make the choice of profit over problem. So I really encourage your message. I think it's one of abundance. And I just hope more people resonate with this messaging, folks. And it's not about me or my own significance. I would just love to see the world like, you know, growing and living in this idea of where can I make an impact, create a profit, and, you know, create some abundance in my life and people around me. So just encourage you guys, keep going, man. That's awesome.
Awesome,
Great,
Ben.
well,
really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today, Ben. And we'll definitely have to have you on for another episode at some point.
Thanks, guys.
Problems are what? Problems are profits!